Reddit, what is the fastest way you've seen a room full of happy people turn real ugly and sour? What happened? In the spring of 1999 I went to a film festival that debuted a documentary about the Gothic subculture called Sech, Death and Airliner. It was made by one of the guys who made Trekkies and was very similar to that movie. It poked fun at the lunatic fringe element of the subculture, but overall it was pretty respectful and everyone in attendance, mostly a toned down group of goths, enjoyed it. At the end of the film the producer did a cap and during it mentioned that he was having a difficult time trying to sell it to the right people. The Columbine massacre had happened just a few weeks earlier, and for a while the media was trying to portray the shooters as goths. A lot of companies were interested in buying it, and the producer was very concerned about not letting it get into the hands of someone who would try to portray goths negatively. The final question of the can was from a guy who went off on a tirade defending the shooters of Columbine and explaining how he understood how they felt and why they did what they did. The entire room went from laughing and feeling very good to overwhelmingly brother-in-lawed off at this guy and booing at him. Completely killed the mood of the evening. Halfway through a wedding reception. Lots of booze. Band leader asks the crowd to find out which man at their table has the nearest birthday. Okay, accomplished point then. The band leader says, each guy give the flower centerpiece to the prettiest girl at the table. 11 other guys get it right and give it to their girl. The guy at our table, fairly inebriated, doesn't give it to his wife. He gives it to the prettiest girl at the table. Holy shit. The air got sucked out of the room. The wife is steaming. She looks ready to grab the vase and smash him in the face with it. The other, less pretty girls are fuming. The girl with the flowers has no idea what to do, but her boyfriend wants to kick the husband's ass. The rest of us are either horror-stricken or nervously laughing. We know we are all gonna hear it. The tables nearby have seen/heard most of it, and the whispering spreads. The band starts to play, and the wife takes the opportunity to get louder before storming out. The party was over. He was just doing what he was told. Poor bastard. We were at a birthday party for one of our friends. He was a biker, and he had a bunch of his biker friends over. One of my husband's other friends, not a biker, was drunk and kept touching my butt. I told him not to touch me, or I would drop him. His last time, I walked by, and he slapped my butt really hard. I swung around and punched them in the face. Because it was a narrow walkway, his head hit the wall. I broke his nose, and it cracked his 2 front teeth. Found out later the next day. He had shitty teeth, so it didn't take much to break them. The party went dead, and it got really quiet. I yelled at him and told him not to fucking touch me ever again. Of course my husband was upstairs taking a dump and missed the whole thing. He came downstairs and I told him we are leaving. All the bikers went over to this guy and started yelling at him about respecting other people's women and stuff about ruining a good time. I'm not sure what happened after that, but we left. No one ever hung out with that guy again. His own brother was part of our group of friends and he never invited him anymore. I got one. So my fiancé and I were on a cruise almost 2 months ago, and we were watching one of the late night comedy shows. It's one of the adult shows, so cursing, such talk, etc. was happening. Anyway, the comedian banters about how there are subjects that polarize people, and he hates those subjects that can do that. One subject he listed was politics, but when he said that, he clarified that I will not be voting for Trump, it should be mentioned that this is a middle-aged African American man from the Bronx. Most of the people clap, a few groan, but everyone lets it go pretty quick, except for one woman who mutters just loud enough for him to hear, "He has made your life so much better." The comedian stops the show. He asks the woman, "No, fuck the show. What has Trump done for me?" She replies with political stuff. Things are getting heated. She stands up, and they are going at it. One man in the back says to the woman, "Irrelevant." She states how this is not irrelevant. The comedian asks her, "Why do you choose now to start your charity work? We are all here to laugh and have a good time." She says, "Yeah, and I'm just another white trash bitch, aren't I? Aren't I?" "Well, ma'am, you said it, not me." "Okay. Ninja." Boom. And 2 butthole puckering seconds later, the crowd erupts in boos against her. She was literally thrown out of the room by the crowd, not the employers. I was actually worried about what was about to happen, let alone someone had the bigoted arrogance to drop that point the comedian went on and use that as an example of how politics polarizes people. Cool loop around, but crazy sheet point TLDR. Woman dropped the N-word during a comedy show due to Trumpgate. Crowd didn't like it. I used to work for a company that made closures, i.e. lids for bottles, etc. Their most popular type of closure was the volcano type that is used for squeezy sauce bottles. This is a type where you twist the outside to open it, squeeze the sauce from the pointy bit of the closure, and onto your hot dog. Incidentally, the type that opens and closes like a sphincter like on the bottle of squeezy honey bottles is called a cat's bum closure. You know when you get the bottle back from the shop and you first have to unscrew the lid to peel off that paper foil thing, and then put the lid back on. That piece of paper actually starts life in the lid and is bonded to the plastic bottle with heat when the lid is first screwed on. But you have to use the right paper for each type of plastic bottle, so the rolls of the paper in the factory were very clearly labeled point except for one. One day, the machine ran out of the big paper roll, so an employee picked the one without the label. It looked the same and was in the right place, so the paper roll was put in the machine. The lids were manufactured, were sent to Master Foods, were assembled into thousands of tomato sauce bottles, which were packed into trucks and sent to supermarkets. When the trucks arrived at their destinations, some of the sauce bottles were found to be leaking badly as they were unpacked, and this was found to be caused by the wrong paper type. Apologies were issued, trucks were cleaned, everything was returned to sender, and a big recall process began, along with liquidated damages. It cost a lot of money. At the factory there were meetings, notices were put up about correct procedures, processes were revised, people were restrained. Obviously the paper roll was removed from the machine and the correct roll was inserted. Production resumed. A week later the machine ran out again. Another employee went to the storeroom and found the unlabeled paper roll back where it had first started and put it back into the machine. Needless to say, the exact thing happened all over again, and as before, the problem was not noticed until the bottles arrived at the supermarket. I had the privilege of being in the previously civilized room when the production manager and a few other important people were told. Holy shit. Amidst all of the shouting, the production manager screamed something along the lines of "What the fuck is wrong here? How the fuck are they so fucking stupid that they make such a huge fuck up and learn fucking nothing from it?" Then he literally lifted his leg and let rip one of the loudest fatchts I have ever heard and left the room. I kid you not. This was a businessman in a nice grey suit, and I had never heard anyone break wind at that company in the 6 months I had worked there. Try googling "Was the Holocaust exaggerated?" You will get pages and pages of evidence from racist organizations. A guy found a PDF allegedly from the Red Cross that was like 100 pages long saying that the Jews died when the Allies cut off German supply lines and the Germans let them starve as opposed to them being gassed. To a Jewish YouTuber who has videos where he visits sites and looks at blueprints and the showers and shows the gas station stuff was added for dramatic effect after the war. Look, I'm reaching into dangerous territory. I don't believe this stuff, but there are a hell of people out there working to come up with evidence it didn't happen or was exaggerated. Couple this with the fact that a lot of us don't want to believe that it happened, and a night of research can leave you pretty confused. After one such night I spoke to my friend who's a historian from a top university and asked if he could explain the chances of the Holocaust being exaggerated. After calling me ridiculous for even suggesting it, he said the chance was 0%. You only have to consider how many witnesses there are. If the Holocaust didn't happen, or was exaggerated, you'd expect at least one Nazi officer or Holocaust survivor to attest to this. Considering the Nazi officer's response was to burn sheetloads of evidence and run to Brazil, it's safe to say they weren't feeling too innocent on the matter. Yesterday evening, at a house party, BBQ, beer, swimming, everyone is having a real good time. I go to get in the pool and these two girls from the Middle East start making fun of me because I have some really bad scar tissue around my left leg, asking me if I got faked up by a dog or something. Essentially the front of my shin and the side and back of my ankle is all scar tissue, and there are a couple of pretty nasty scars on my thigh in the front and on the outside. I had to explain that while I was in the sandbox working private security for a humanitarian organization providing aid to children, that one of the guys we were with stepped on an IED and blew his leg off. I went in to get him, and another went off, shrapnel tearing chunks out of my lower leg, and then 3 entry/2 exit wounds getting shot trying to drag him to cover. Got him out. He was screaming the entire time. I'm covered in blood and sheet holding this guy, looking at the leg in the dirt, and wondering if it's his or mine. Everyone just stared for a solid minute or 3. One of the guys says that's some hero sheet right there. That's when I told them he died. Right there. While I was still half-as holding half-as shielding him. Point sheet got dark real quick. Point edit. And don't give me any of that hero sheet. I worked for a private org and saw some pretty nasty sheet you hire people for because you don't want to get caught doing it yourself. I'm not a good person. I wouldn't say the room was full of happy people, but I saw a similar situation. My brother-in-law had very suddenly passed away, and so we had to help arrange everything. Point during the funeral, everyone was, of course, weeping and mourning the loss of him. Very quietly and respectful. There was also others helping console those who were taking it very hard. I kept having to leave because I had a 4-month-old who would giggle and coo, and I felt bad for those who were mourning. Anyways, as I was walking back to the pew, I saw my husband turn to the guy behind him and ask the guy to please stop swearing. The guy started to puff his chest and asked if my husband wanted to fight him. This guy was in no way related to the family and had never met the person who passed. Anyways, my sister-in-law, the widow, turned around and yelled, "You need to get the fuck out." To the guy. Point the guy was a boyfriend to one of the deceased's sisters. So that whole side of the family stood up and started yelling at the widow. The widow stood up and tried to charge at the sister. My husband managed to stop her anyways. Half of the room left, while the other stood/sat awkwardly as the police escorted the deceased's family members out. Point what a crazy funeral. Both sides of the family were not too fond of each other, but it was very startling and sudden. Was at a wedding once, and the groom was doing his speech. Sounded like it was coming to an end. Throughout the whole thing a massive screen was showing happy pictures of the couple. People were smiling and laughing at the jokes. Then he gets to the end and says, "Most of all thanks to my best man and my new beautiful wife for teaching me a life lesson." He looks over to his best man and winks, then to his wife with a cringe smile. Everyone is sitting on the edge of their seats waiting to hear what will come next. "Jen, you are a real beauty and the kindest person I know, blah blah blah." He turns to his best man. "Congratulations Dan on scoring so big. Seeden here has been banging my wife for the past 6 months." He skips to the next slide to show a video of Jen and Dan having sex. Literally drops his microphone and leaves. I hadn't a clue what to think, do or say. It was insane. He had another mate who came to pick him up and just left with his beer in hand. I was at my younger cousin's birthday party and his stepmother was pregnant. Everyone talked about the new baby and the family, and then my grandmother said how in 8 to 10 years we will be talking about how I will have a baby. I told them that I don't want children, and in that moment my grandmother gets this shocked look on her face and everybody looks at me like I'm the worst person ever. And the second time was connected with the first story. About 8 months later I went with my family to visit my then 5-month-old cousin. My aunt told me that I will change my mind about children and proceeded to give me my cousin to hold her. Again I said that I don't want children because I want to have fun while I'm young and not take care of somebody. Of course everyone looked shocked and my baby cousin started crying. After that they still tried to convince me that I should have children when I'm young, and they would always show me pictures and videos of babies, but that stopped. On a flight to Seattle from Orange County, about 30 minutes before we land we get delayed with a storm that popped out of nowhere right over Seattle. Point all air traffic is delayed. We are like 50th in line to land. Get told we have to make a landing at another airport 2 hours north to refuel. Point at this point everyone is bummed, but it happened so fast it's not the worst thing in the world. Sheet went nuclear after that though. Point so we land, refuel, and then the pilot comes out and tells everyone we can't leave because he's flown too many hours that day. Also the airport is tiny and closed, so we can't get off the plane. Everyone freaked the fuck out after that little announcement point, and then we got stuck in a plane on a runway for 2 hours. Yay, edit. Just 4 follow-up questions. We eventually got off the plane. We were supposed to get home in Seattle around 10 p.m., but we got off the plane in this podunk airport around 1 a.m. when they finally managed to wrangle a few staff members to let everyone in a roped-off small terminal. And then there were no taxis, no hotels, no way to leave. Oh, and if you did leave the roped off area you could not come back into the airport because that SA agents don't get there until 3 am. Edit 2. Sorry, the eventual resolution was a rescue plane was sent at 8 am the next morning. At that point the Amtrak station was open as well, so I think some people took trains and taxis and stuff as well. It's just weird how a flash storm that existed for all of 30 minutes was enough to piss all over the flight. Kind of funny, if you think about it. Kind of sheety, if you think about it longer. Years ago in a college town there was a small block of duplexes all rented by students. It got pretty wild on the weekends, and usually the parties spilled out of the duplexes and into the parking lot/lawn and everyone mixed and mingled. One unit had a dog that got out and unfortunately got hit by a speeding car. Police arrived. The dog was not killed instantly, and an officer talked to the owner and agreed to put the dog out of its misery. We were all asked to stuff back into our respective duplexes so there would not be throngs of people milling about as the police took care of the dog. Sad as it was, within 10 minutes the now absolutely packed living room was back to partying, drinking, laughing, and other duplex units were doing the same. Maybe we were hoping, if we were loud enough, we wouldn't hear the shot point. Then all of a sudden some guy who arrived late and had no idea what was happening knocked on the door real loud. Everyone just assumed it was the police again, and it got very quiet. Right as he flung the door wide open with a stupid "what's up," we heard a loud bang of a pistol point. The entire living room of people dove into chaos. Some were yelling at this guy and throwing things. Others were sobbing and wailing hysterically. In one moment it went from a party to a psychological experiment as far too many drunk people in a tight space had to contemplate and process what had just happened. My buddy, let's call him Ricky, and his wife were having a holiday party at his place and everyone was having such a blast. We were all a bunch of gamers, so some people were playing WoW, everyone was drinking, and generally merry. Later in the night the party is in full swing, and we run out of vodka. No problem, there is a Ralph's across the street. Nope, not good enough for Ricky. He starts screaming at his wife for upsetting everyone at the party by running out of vodka. I step in to calm him down, and he pushes me away. His wife is crying, and he slugs her in the face with his fist. Everything stopped. It was quiet for a second, and then hell broke loose. One of the guys started hitting Ricky. The group as a whole does not tolerate hitting a woman. I went to pull him off of Ricky. Two of the women run to grab Ms. Ricky. They take her to the bedroom, where they start packing up her stuff as they are getting her the hell out of there. A few other people just grab their stuff and peace out. I kick out the dude that was beating up on Ricky, and I'm talking to him outside to calm him down. Two guys are inside blocking the doorway that leads to the bedroom, while Ms. Ricky and the other ladies pack up her stuff. He is kicking and trying to get in the room to no avail. He is crazy drunk and everyone else is basically sober due to the gravity of the situation. We all leave with Ms. Ricky to get her to her girlfriend's place. Fast forward. With a lot of encouragement Ms. Ricky filed for divorce. She is now single and happily doing her own thing. No one talks to Ricky anymore. We do not know where he is, nor do we care. TLDR. Dude beats his wife at a holiday party, everyone goes nuts. When I was a kid, my family and I were at a big family gathering with all sorts of relatives and the like. My brother and I were playing badminton in the backyard in full view of almost everyone at the gathering. Everyone was laughing and having a good time, except me. I'm terrible at badminton. I'm also extremely competitive. A bad combination. My brother was smoking me at this dumb birdie game in front of everyone. I finally lost my temper and just threw my stupid tiny tennis racket at him, full force. Beamed him right in the noggin in full view of the entire family. Everyone immediately rushed to my brother's aid. He was perfectly fine. The racket didn't even leave a mark, and told me I was a dunce. I got at least 10 private talks by everyone about how that was not okay. 5/7 would not recommend. TLDR. Got mad at my brother for beating me at badminton in front of the whole family. Threw a racket at his head. Family was angry. At a barracks party in 2013, when I was still a new guy in my first unit, a guy, henceforth mortar in my troop, was about to get out and wanted to get trashed with everyone. Wasn't much of a bar or club guy, so we stayed in the barracks for his going away party. Anyways, my troop had recently been assigned its first ever female soldier, who was a chemical specialist. Basically she was in charge of our gas masks and shit like that. She was pretty chill and fit in really well with us. We had been preached to by our first sergeant to treat her like a sister, and many of us did just that. She was asked to protect just like any of the guys. She was one of us, and we protect our own. A few hours into the party, some guy from headquarters troop, henceforth HHT, showed up and started drinking with us. At some point in the night, the girl dropped something and bent down to pick it up. HHT made a crude comment along the lines of "I'd love to tear that as up in front of Mortar," and Mortar didn't like that. Not gonna lie though, she was fine as fuck, which is a rarity in the military, and if I could have, I would have Mortar got in HHT's face and they started shoving each other. Everyone else in the room took Mortar's side because fuck HHT. He was outnumbered 9-1, with more outside unaware what was happening. We kicked him out, but only after some of the guys got a few cheap shots in on him. The party went on without problem, but for a solid 15 minutes everyone was ready to kick us and take names. Edit. Fixed a word edit too. A little bit of context I should have had originally. Like I said, she was fine as hell. We all wanted to fuck her, but she was off limits. HHT was a known creep, and the only reason we let him drink with us was because we saw him wandering about with a beer before coming up to us. We gave him a chance to hang, and he blew it. Everybody was slowly waking up the morning after a party where we'd all been blitzed beyond belief. Alcohol, shrooms, there may have been coke, based on the group. Anyway, not a party you drive away from. Then someone noticed L's truck was gone. Okay, maybe he just got up first. Hopefully he was sober. Somebody tried to call him, but it went straight to voicemail. Then L's dad called the best friend and said his truck had been found obliterated on the side of the road and nobody could find L. Went from "dude you were so drunk last night" to "holy shit, I hope my friend isn't dead real quick." Girls were crying. People were frantically blowing up his phone. Eventually L called his dad. He was unhurt, but embarrassed and fearful of his consequences. Thankfully it was just a sheet and a property damage. His truck and the parked car he hit. No injuries, but he lost his license for a long time, and he didn't come out to parties anymore. I live in a smaller town in Kansas and I'm Mexican. Family has been here, in this area mind you, for 100 years. The town is on the interstate with about 20,000 people, not far from the largest town in Case, Wichita. My family and I once went to a barn sale about 30 miles out into the country. Picture, a family of Mexicans walks into a private barn on a farm full of white folks in the middle of Kansas. Complete silence. No eye contact except for the old lady selling antique junk who just glares hatefully. So we cruise the place and the different booths, where no one makes conversation. We bought some hot dogs and drinks. Those folks were nice, cause we spent our money. We bought some raw milk which no one had the nerve to drink, and we beat it the hell out of there. You would have thought we were an invading horde of rabid ISIS trans Muslims. Folks, this was in 2015. Not really happy, but altogether for similar reasons. Recently my mom's friend died of ovarian cancer. She was in her mid-40s maybe. Anyway, after the funeral her family hosted a gathering at her sister's house. Everyone was standing around, eating, and suddenly the sister was talking a bit louder. She sells that it works bullshit, and was talking to a group of people about it. She holds up a can of something called greens, and says I tried to get her to take these, but she never would listen. Now she's dead. I don't want to end up that way, so I've been doubling up. I have never seen people look so immediately disgusted and enraged all at once. The group literally all turned and walked away, and the gathering quickly fell apart. Her daughter swooped in and took her to another room. The worst part is that she is still posting that sheet in a similar manner on FB, despite being told by her kids that it is not cool. She is convinced that it is a life-saving tonic. When I was 6, I was invited to a birthday party by a classmate of mine. When I got there I quickly realized I was the only classmate to attend. Everyone else was from her family, parents, uncles, aunts, cousins, grandparents, etc. When the time came for cake, all the kids were seated around a table in a horseshoe shape. We're all given a slice of cake. Before eating, we sing happy birthday to the birthday girl. Right after the song ends, her friend grabs her from behind the head and shoves her face into her cake slice. The whole room erupts into laughter. Then the birthday girl does the same to her friend. Then someone else does it. One by one, everyone starts to shove their neighbor's face into their cake. I'm on the end of the horseshoe. No one is on my left, and to my right is the birthday girl's 1-year-old cousin. I shoved his face into the cake and laughed. No one else was laughing. I looked around the room and saw that no one else had cake on their face. Just a look of disgust. TLDR, I hallucinated a cake fight and assaulted a baby. My sister's wedding. It was a small backyard wedding in Winnipeg and most of the family flew in the morning of. My sister did not want bridesmaids, so after I helped her in her dress I went and had a seat in the backyard and waited like everyone else for everything to start. Music and the husband to be walks down the aisle and the justice of the peace is at the front and we all just wait and wait and wait some more. Someone finally ran into the house to see what the fuck was going on and found a Dear John note, and my dear sister had fled the wedding. In about 5 minutes flat it turned into a yelling match on what a piece of shit my sister was, and my dad and I looked at each other and also fled the scene. The groom himself was so mad he was throwing chairs and just screaming like an ape. Super strange, and I could not get out of there fast enough. My sister ended up going on a 4-month bender of drugs and alcohol. We have never talked about the time she almost got married. Back in the 80s I was a kid in primary school. One afternoon after school I was playing outside. It was winter in Canada, so we are playing in the snow. I somehow slipped on ice and fell. My right thumb hit the ice patch first and bent all the way back to my wrist. I'm a kid, so I don't really pay it no mind. But the next morning, my thumb hurts like a beach and it's swollen as fuck. I show it to my mom, and she says we have to go to the hospital. Yeah, no school, so we were in the waiting room at the hospital, and there's a TV up there in the corner of the waiting room. A bunch of people waiting like us watch it. There's the regular programming, but then the TV show is interrupted by a special program. It's the mid-80s. Number 24-hour news channels. Interruptions happen when something important happens, so the TV switches to a feed from some US channel. Now everybody in the room watches. They are watching intently. As a kid, I'm all wide-eyed and excited. This is awesome. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have the main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and lift off. Lift off. Everybody in the waiting room is smiling and happy. I'm up on my feet to watch the TV closer to see Challenger flying up to spacepoint, and then boom. I remember the screams and the shouts. Then some cries. My eyes were glued on the TV screen. Took a while for me to look around. My mom was crying, and a lot of other people were too. I was confused, mostly. But after 30 years, I've never ever been in a room of people whose feelings switched as suddenly as that day. Happiness, shock, mourning, all in about 2 minutes. I'm fairly new to Reddit, so forgive me if my formatting is terrible, but here's my story. On January 3rd, 2014, my wife and I were in the kitchen making breakfast for our 2 sons, ages 4 and 2. Now, my wife and I aren't typically morning people, but that day we were in a great mood. We had gotten just the right amount of sleep. I had the day off from work and the kids had slept peacefully throughout the night without wetting the bed. Our upstairs neighbors had also been pretty quiet the night before, so we were able to relax and enjoy our evening without thinking our ceiling was going to cave in from them being rowdy and stomping around all hours of the night. Basically, it was just a perfect morning for us. My wife and oldest were making pancakes, or as they like to call them canpakes. It was an inside joke between the two of them, and I was playing with my younger son. My phone starts ringing as my wife is putting on some eggs and bacon. This immediately strikes us as odd, because all my friends/family know that I like to sleep in late on my days off, and that I rarely get enough sleep with 2 young children running around the apartment constantly. So we know, if our phone rings before 10 AM, that it's usually someone we don't care to speak to, or that something is wrong. As soon as I answer the phone, my mom says, "I know it's early, but I need to talk to you. Something has happened to your stepbrother." She goes on to tell me that he was found unconscious in his mom's home in Western Virginia earlier that morning, and that he's been non-responsive to the paramedics/doctors since. They weren't sure what had happened, but they were trying to find out. I could hear my stepfather in the background talking to someone, but couldn't make out exactly what was being said, just that he didn't sound like his normal self. My mom tells me that she'll keep me updated, and we hang up. It must have put me in shock or something, because I didn't say anything for about 15 minutes and my wife was starting to freak out. He had just moved back to Virginia about 5 months before this. My brother had a lot of health problems back then. He had been diagnosed with epilepsy a couple years prior, and since then had started using drugs fairly often. Usually it was just pot. He said that it helped with the seizures. But my brother was also young. He was in his early 20s, so he did quite a bit of partying, and there had been several times where I had literally found him passed out somewhere, or working off some high from something harder in some random place. Hell, one time he tried to walk into someone else's house, and then when he realized he couldn't get his key to unlock the front door, he called my stepfather and asked him if he changed the locks. Anyway, the partying and the stupid stunts that he always pulled usually caused us to butt heads. The guy was smart, I mean nearly genius level intellect, and it always pissed me off that he just wasted that intelligence and potential. I wanted better things for him than waking up in a gutter to shake off a bad trip. He knew that, but he always told me it was his life and that he'd live it however he wanted. Eventually we grew apart, and the last things we said to one another were basically "screw you." Now here I was, wondering what had happened to him, and if he was going to be okay. A few hours later my mother called back and told me that his mom had left a few days before New Year's Eve and went on a cruise with her husband, leaving my stepbrother and one of his friends at her house to watch over the place while they were gone. Well, apparently my brother decided that he had wanted to celebrate the new year in the best way he knew how, faked up. He had made it through the festivities without any incidents. Usually there were signs he would have a seizure soon. But while he was working off his hangover, he had suffered a grand mal seizure. His friend had found him passed out in the bathroom that morning, and after trying for about 20 minutes to wake him up, called 911. At this point I was scared out of my mind. I had always figured that one day he and I would talk again, and he would finally just get why I was hard on him. I mean, he was my little brother. Of course I loved him. I just wanted better for him, and as much as I tried to hang in there and be there for him, I didn't want to watch him destroy his life. I figured we'd have that "I finally get why you were that way" conversation, and things would go back to being like how they were when we were kids. I'll never have that conversation with him now. The doctors pronounced him brain dead 2 days later, and my stepfather pulled the plug on January 6th after driving all the way from Atlanta to Virginia. My brother had told us all that if he had ever ended up in a situation like this, that he didn't want to be kept alive by a machine. I think he knew somehow. It faked me up pretty bad, and I still can't think about him without getting emotional. I wish I had said and done so many things differently. Most of all, I wish I had gotten the chance to at least say I was sorry. So yeah, that pretty much turned our perfect morning into one of the worst weeks of my life. Now I don't ever act like I'll have time to do something later, and I try to never leave shit unresolved with my friends/family. TLDR, having the perfect morning with my family when I find out that my estranged stepbrother suffered a grand mal seizure that led to his death. Edit. Formatting. Probably lost in comments, but here we go. Me and my HS drama club were given free tickets to another high school's performance of Pippin for a state theater conference. Their performance was alright. The show had a huge punk theme to it for some reason, but okay, nothing big. And then it got to the finale. I haven't seen the original show, but from what I've been told, it did not go the way it was supposed to. The show had a theme of being great and extraordinary, and it followed Pippin trying different things to be extraordinary. The ensemble was trying to help him the entire time, and in the end we are going to have him go out with a bang. The original show had a huge magic trick and fire and all these spectacular effects in which Pippin realized might kill him. But this is a high school play, they can't afford that. So how does he go out? With a gun to his head. The director describes someone blowing their own faking brains out as spectacular. It doesn't end there. When Pippin denies blowing out his brains, the director then decided to have the narrator turn to the audience, pissed off at Pippin, and ask if anyone else wants to be extraordinary and go out with a bang. We left that show so fucking bitter that I felt my entire emotions were like the depths of hell. To rub salt on the wound, my best friend's favorite cousin committed suicide 1 week earlier. October 14th, 2003. A large gathering of Chicago Cubs fans had flocked to my dad's basement/bar. Family, friends, coworkers, friends of friends and coworkers. Even a random guy who was on his way to a local bar and saw a house with a bunch of Cubs gathered round point the series against the Marlins had the Cubs up 3-2 to win a best of 7. The inning was the 8th. Chicago was winning 3-2-0. The Cubs were 5 outs away from their first National League pennant win since 1945. The Cubs in the World Series. It was inevitable. You could cut the anticipation in that room with a knife. We all knew it was going to happen. Then Steve Bartman. Steve was a Cubs fan enjoying the game at Wrigley Field. Louis Castillo, I believe, was at bat. He knocked off a few foul balls. One-headed Steve I faked the Cubs lulls Bartman's way. Moises Alou had a good chance to catch this easy out. Alou leaped in the air, dishing for the white and red rock. Steve spent years with the police. Escort Bartman stuck his glove over Alou's and caught the ball. Could have been an easy out point. The room fell silent. We were all aghast. We knew. Wrigley Field knew. The curse of the goat had struck again. The Cubs, being cursed for not allowing a pet goat into a game, back when the Ottoman Empire was a thing, lost 8-3. Steve I did it for lulz. Bartman needed a police escort from the stadium. The basement bar needed to wash away its grief with beer. Worst bowl game ever TLDR. Fuck you, Steve Bartman. Some of us are still salty 13 years later, you prick. I was at a play with my girlfriend at the time and some of her family. The play was really good and everyone was having a good time. The night before I went out drinking with some buddies and we made a late night Arby's run. Needless to say, but these beef and cheddars were not sitting well with the dozen Budweisers I had drank and had given me absolutely terrible SBD gas the next day. So we're at the play and I let one of these demons out and it immediately filled the air with the most repugnant stench ever bestowed on this planet. My girlfriend knew it was me right away and shot me a glare as if to say, "Are you faking kidding me?" And, "Do not do that again." It quickly became apparent that everyone else smelled as well as there was a lot of grumbling, uncomfortable shifting in the seats and a lot of nose holding. This is not the type of fatch that passes quickly. No, this was the type that lingers in the air for several minutes, just sticking to everything. The foul gas cloud was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. I recall a child behind me saying, "Mom, something smells really bad." Few minutes later, my girlfriend's grandmother is seen wafting herself with the program and looking like she was about to have a heart attack. My girlfriend asked her what was wrong, to which grandma replied that something smelled awful and was making her sick. My girlfriend thought this was hilarious and started laughing really loud to the point where the crowd shushed her and one of the actors looked over in our direction to see what all the commotion was about. Several minutes passed and the smell was gone. Everything was back to normal. But just when everyone thought it was safe to breathe again, I let out another horrible fatched that was far worse than the first one. I knew immediately that this one was trouble. The child behind me cried out, "Oh my god, that smell is back again." The other audience members became more anxious and several of them started gagging/coughing. Grandma left her seat and started walking down the row to get away from it, coughing and wafting her face like someone would do if they walked through a cloud of smoke. One guy got so mad that he loudly and clearly yelled, "Who the fuck keeps fetching?" At this point, I faking lost it and was laughing so hard I was crying. My girlfriend was not pleased and kept glaring at me. This fetched caused so much drama that the actors of the play completely stopped for a moment to let everything settle down. These fetchts were so rank and in a crowded theater with poor ventilation that literally halted the play. People were so pissed/disgusted, and I've never been more proud of a fetched in my life. TLDR, I fetched horribly during a play that near killed my girlfriend's grandma and halted the production of the play. It was epic. My senior graduating class lost our school's homecoming skit competition. We walked out of the assembly where they announced the rankings. These homecoming skits were really fun to watch. The theme was different every year. There were dance numbers, and there was basically a story that revolved around supporting our football team. The seniors had won each of the past 3 years up to when it was my class's time to perform. We just assumed it was a rally event, and who won didn't really matter, so that meant the seniors won every year. Our class was excited to be on top. Our skit was really well done. I think the theme was cities, and we had chosen Las Vegas. The whole school was decorated for our skit. We had the schoolyard duties dress as poker dealers. We had put a lot of effort into our surefire victory point. Come the day of the assembly, we were ready to do our chant rhyming with our graduating year as they announced the winners. It started as we expected. 4th place, freshmen. Boo. Let's cheese them for sucking. 3rd place, sophomores. How do you guys suck a little less? Here comes the juniors. 2nd place, seniors. Wait, what? 1st place, juniors. What the fuck? At first there was stunned silence. The school had everyone's favorite pet teacher do the announcement, presumably to let us down easy. One of the seniors who had helped produce our skit and was a golden child of the school broke the silence by yelling bullshit. That got the rest of the popular kids going, and eventually the entire senior class. Our leader eventually calmed us down and calmly told us we were going to walk out as a show of disagreement. This was just the beginning of the assembly. It was the homecoming hype assembly after all. The school faculty couldn't stop us though. Pet teacher tried calming us down, but the class wasn't hearing it. Obviously some students feared getting in trouble, but eventually that couldn't outweigh the disdain of your peers if you were to stay behind. Sure enough, we all left the assembly for an early lunch. No one got into trouble, but this seemed to be a catalyst for what seemed like a very chaotic remainder of our school year. Seniors began instituting organized senior ditch days on a regular basis. Sure, every school has had one or two, but for the remainder of our year, the most popular group of seniors organized off-campus events to go to during school days. Water balloon fights, going to the lake, going to the city. There was always something. Point in our graduation ceremony, one of the retiring teachers, a favorite of many seniors, brought it up in his address. He made us laugh and didn't chastise for our actions, but did relay some life advice out of the whole ordeal. So yeah, bunch of angry angsty teenagers lost a school competition we all thought we should have won. I was in boot camp, and one night about half of us were in the break room in our barracks. We had recently gotten a radio and we were listening to the music and shooting the sheet as we were shining our boots. Someone starts talking about who he'd have sex with from the girls in our sister company, Navy/Orlando, and that starts a raucous conversation between about 30 18-20-year-olds that haven't been laid in weeks. Guys are showing their moves, trying to one-up each other. Everyone is joking around, having a good time, and we start talking about this hot female chief that was the company commander of another company in our barracks, and it's getting really graphic. A little while later, this guy is in the middle of a story about getting caught by his mom jerking off with a slice of bologna and encounter chiefs. The room went dead silent until, you guessed it, the female chief we were talking about yelled, "Get on the line." We bolted for our spots in front of our acts and everyone that was in the room was told to step forward. Well, it turns out our dumbasses had the windows open in the room, and they had heard us, and proceeded to walk to the other end of the parade grounds, where they could still hear us. They threatened us with getting thrown out of the Navy, or getting washed back 2 weeks, but I don't remember us getting into too much trouble other than having to PT for about 2 hours after that, and losing our radio and break room privileges. At the last roundtable managers meeting I went to as part of my internship, my director went around the table and asked each manager what non-essential tasks they and their staff did during library downtime. The managers were happy to do so because it was a great way to share ideas amongst themselves. But not our director. She had other plans. After each manager spoke, she took their statements, formed them into staves, and beat them about head and shoulders with them. That's an essential duty that needs to happen X times a day, or it's no wonder nothing gets done in your branch. If you consider that worth doing instead of Y, Z, and Q, or why do you even have your staff do that when they refuse to do it right? A few of her criticisms were valid, but most of them were out of the blue. She seemed to have forgotten that the branches are staffed with only 2 or 3 people total, managers included, and that there isn't enough time to get into the minutiae of shelf reading and swapping out displays properly if the library gets busy, unlike the main branch, where there is a minimum of 2 people on desk at all times, usually closer to 4, with others in office. I have never seen interest and peace replaced with horror and fear so very quickly. The last manager to go, who was brand new and has exactly one, even newer, clerk, was so put off that she tried to get by without saying anything. The director took the paper she had written on, read it out loud, and then gave her the same treatment. I thought the new manager was going to cry then and there, and a few of us had to comfort her after the meeting when she did cry. If our director was going to make everyone there dislike and distrust her, she was successful indeed. I was at a Halloween party a friend of a friend invited me to when I was in college. My costume consisted entirely of a skull mask that got lost when I took it off to drink beer. Anyway, it matches this smug as fuck prick in a 3-piece suit. He made it very clear this wasn't his costume. He's kissing girls' hands like he's some kind of faking Prince Charming, and then he chugs half a bottle of rum. I offer him $5 for a drink of it, and he says no and hands me a warm beer that had already been opened. He had this real funny air to him, like he was trying almost too hard to be suave. After about an hour his girlfriend shows up, and they start screaming at each other in the middle of the house and proceed to glare at everyone, like we were the inconsiderate ones for faking eavesdropping or something. Finally they take their argument down to a simmer, and migrate to the corner to whisper chat at each other. This is when the mood started to change. The host of the party invited me and my friend out with himself and a few other people who were stepping out for a smoke. I don't smoke, but I went anyway for a chance at some fresh air and to be able to talk to a few people without the roar of a party. Suddenly we hear a near-shattering scream from the girlfriend as her exasperation reached a boiling point, and moments later Suit Boy storms out and kicks the host's glass ashtray across the yard, shattering it. "What the fuck, guy?" I yelled. He turned back towards me and screamed, "What are you looking at?" The host and friends were looking worried, so I stood up and said, "Not a whole fucking lot." He glared at me for a few minutes, but I had a good 6 inches on him, and the rest of the lot that was with me were standing at this point too, clearly prepared to forcibly de-escalate the situation. So he stormed off into the night and his girlfriend passed out upstairs after that. The whole thing seemed cursed. People started acting like real assholes. At one point a girl kept screaming that she needed to drive her car home because she promised her sister to have it back in the morning, but literally everybody in the party told her at various points, "No way, you're faking driving." We offered to call her a cab and eventually her brother showed up in his own car to pick her up, but she was extremely insistent she had to have her car back home, and when she was refused her keys she also stormed off into the night, alone, in a bad part of town. When her brother found out he sprinted off after her and literally carried her in kicking and screaming and told her to either pass out here or he'd take her home. The whole time some scumbag was trying to convince her to bang in the garage, but the host kept separating them and telling him he would have to leave if he insisted on being a scumbag. Everyone was throwing off bad vibes, being dissish to each other for little reason. Finally the friend of a friend who invited me to the thing in the first place got caught in the host's room nailing this chick he'd been crushing on for months, but who had a boyfriend. Apparently he convinced her to dump him. My friend and I joined the host outside again at the end of the party, and he thanked us for being the only people who didn't stir up a crock of shit, and we left. We were having a free day in PE class. I was a sophomore in high school. Half the gym went to one side of the room to play a mini game of soccer and the other half played basketball. Class was great. The teacher decided we could be trusted and left the room to help set up for a pep rally. I was playing soccer and had my back turned to the basketball players. Then, I hear a loud thud. Definitely bone meeting gym floors. A chorus of "Oh, S" and "Dude, S" go up behind me. I turn around and there's a kid laying face down on the ground. Someone goes, "Dude?" And the gym goes sickeningly silent. Everyone's eyes and mouths were in the shape of an "oh no" one moved. I remember thinking, okay, what the fuck, guess that's my sign. I run up and a few other students start moving too. A couple of the guys start trying to roll him over. His glasses fall off and there's a gash on his chin, probably from when he hit the ground. The gash is getting wider and wider, bright pink flesh on the inside, but no blood. "He's not breathing," I said. "If he's not bleeding, he's not breathing. No pulse." Someone had gotten the coach and someone else had run for the nurse. The coach comes barreling in and separates the crowd from the presumably dead student. A nurse runs in with a defibrillator. Other staff members take us to the other gym next to this one. Ambulance staff come running in, strap the boy to a stretcher, and rush out the doors. All we could hear, the whole way down the tile hall, was the flatline beer point, "Don't worry though, he lived." I believe the nurse was credited for saving his life, thanks to grabbing the defibrillator. Turns out the boy was born with a heart defect and never knew, I guess. He returned to school a couple months later with a light pink scar on his chin. Edit, spelling. I was working as a lifeguard during our last open swim of the day. Me and another lifeguard were watching over 40 to 50 people in the pools when I saw this man and his wife run from the hot tub to our kiddie pool and hop in. I wasn't sure what they were doing at first until I saw the father pull a child in a life jacket out of the pool. Now I was about to hop down and help this family when he hands the kid over to the wife and she takes off into the women's locker room, and he proceeds to hop out of the kiddie pool and yell at me and the other lifeguard, yelling things like, "Where the fuck were you guys at? That's my faking child. Do your goddamn job." And the last one that was ironic. "I was a lifeguard once, guys. I know this shit. Do your fucking goddamn jobs." After his little tantrum, one of the other patrons tried to calm the situation down and make him understand how childish he was acting. The whole pool was dead silent and staring at him, and you could tell on their faces that most of them were pissed at him for treating us like shit. I didn't say anything because I wasn't even aware of what was going on until he yelled at us. Plus, lifeguards can't really keep tabs on every single person with over 40 other patrons in the pool, and I didn't want to say anything that didn't make me seem unprofessional, disrespectful, or anything that would have made the situation even worse. He grabbed his kids and threw the life jackets they had on, which were the rec center's life jackets too, on the ground, and left with his children, slamming the door on his way out, and the whole pool had this very depressing atmosphere to it after he left. Now, I was able to take this situation well, as I've had situations like this in the past, where people were yelling at me, or throwing insults, and generally being disrespectful as holes. Unfortunately, the other guard who I was working with had an anxiety attack, and was absolutely hysterical, and it was so bad she couldn't even watch the pool, let alone work. So we called another guard in, and he determined it was better to help the other guard during her panic attack, and we then had to call in the supervisor, who's also a certified lifeguard, to watch the pool for the rest of the night. Once the shift was over, I told my supervisor what happened during that situation. He ultimately told me it wasn't me or the other guard's fault, but rather, it was the fault of the guy who yelled at us. At our rec center, we have this rule that there must be at least one parent watching the pool in order to keep track of their child. As stated above, the lifeguard cannot keep tabs on everyone, especially with a bunch of other patrons, and watch them, and can alert the lifeguard if something is wrong. But these two parents in the hot tub weren't watching their child, and ultimately yelled at us for a responsibility that he was supposed to have. We had done everything we were supposed to do. The whole night felt kind of depressing afterwards, but later on came to find out people had given us compliments and support who had been there and called out the rude behavior of this one patron. My higher ups wanted to talk to him about his behavior, but he has not been back since point TLDR. Asshole saves his kid, then proceeds to yell at me and another lifeguard. Other lifeguard has a panic attack, leaves and the supervisor takes their place. Whole night was depressing afterwards. Surprise birthday party for my dad up in the canyon. My Bill is a typical moronic musclehead douche, and we already know about a few incidences of him at the very least bending the line between abuse and just being a dick to my sister, but she loves him and all that point my sister's kids were talking about rock climbing, and my uncle knew of a spot very close to our picnic area where people rock climb. He talks to my sister who says it's alright, and he takes them all up there. My uncle is very familiar with the outdoors, a pacifist, 6 feet 4 inches, 150-pound beanpole nice guy. My brother-in-law comes back to the picnic area and doesn't immediately see his kids and goes stampeding through the area and finally sees my uncle with all the kids up a perfectly safe path along a perfectly quiet river. He comes charging up the path saying, "What the fuck do you think you're doing with my kids?" Meanwhile all the other families at the rock climbing area start gathering their children away from their brother-in-law. My uncle tries to explain that he talked to my sister, but my brother-in-law is in the red already and takes his kids back down to the picnic area. Point uncle comes back down, head hanging low, feeling all sorts of sheepish. He doesn't have any kids, 60 plus years old, married to a wonderful woman when he was 40 plus. Both are great people. Point at this point I have a first-hand account of it all. I hear my brother-in-law talking very sternly to my sister, telling her it's her fault and she needs to apologize for him. She's just trying to calm him down and not embarrass her. Finally he goes over to my uncle and tries to explain how he can't handle not knowing where his kids are, and he'll do anything to make sure they're safe. Still fired up and definitely coming off as a threat, even though you could also assume high emotions. My uncle responds calmly and unemotionally that he understands, and it's over, let's just leave it be. My brother-in-law keeps going. My uncle finally says that he's heard about brother-in-law's temper and it's nice to finally see it in person. My brother-in-law doesn't like that, and now my sister comes over to try to get my brother-in-law to back off and sit down. The brother-in-law keeps talking about how no one had the right to take his kids, and on and on. Then my aunt's mother bear instincts kick in, and she tells my brother-in-law to blow it out his ass and starts to pack up, and tells my uncle they're leaving. I start helping pack up, and to get physically between uncle and brother-in-law, knowing that brother-in-law could beat the piss out of me, but at least it wouldn't be as bad as my uncle. I help them down to their car, apologizing the whole way. Sister comes down to try and apologize. Uncle half-heartedly says he appreciates it, but calmly states brother-in-law is a faking asshole. Sister just shuts down. They leave. I put my arm around my sister and tell her I'm sorry that all happened. Totally unacceptable behavior by my brother-in-law. She's silent. Point there's follow-up details if you want them, but I'll leave it there to stick within the answer to the asked question. Oh, I got this. We were flying out on EasyJet to Italy. EasyJet is a budget UK airline. It's pretty terrible. Point there was a technical issue with the plane. This meant it obviously had to be repaired. An hour later someone came on the intercom and announced that they had, and I'm quoting here, misplaced the plane. They did know where they had left it. Point, so they called in another plane. This was 4 hours later. Issue was it was smaller than the plane that we were supposed to have, so 19 people had to give up their seats and fly out the next day. Of course they called out our seat numbers one by one to board us, so they didn't have a full-on riot on their hands. It gets worse. Yes, this shocked me as well. We were waiting on the plane to take off, and a stewardess announced that the plane was 70 kilograms overweight, so they couldn't take off. So they were going to remove 6 bags at random from the hold. Now the bags were about 20 kilograms each, so why they needed 6 is also beyond me. Now here's where it kicked off. There was a 30-man stag do on the plane, and the groom spotted his bag being pulled off the plane. I was asleep at camp, but at Bonnaroo some years back Kanye West was supposed to play a late night show on the main stage. There was a big fuss about trying to accommodate him and his glow-in-the-dark show. So this was after the headliner was supposed to go at midnight or so, after Pearl Jam. My parents walked around, saw on the screen that his show was delayed 30 minutes or an hour, PJ went about an hour over. Whatever. They went to the show they wanted to see. Phil Lesh. He played a set and then ended fairly short. Talk is that he couldn't play a competing set against Can I. Either way, my parents continued to wander. The happy crowd waiting for Can I turned sour. Very sour. This place went from one of the most peace-loving places in the world to what they described as pure anger. Bad vibes everywhere. When he finally came on, it was starting to dawn, so his 1 or 2 AM show became a 4 or 5 AM show, and supposedly kicked off an original member of the Grateful Dead off stage a bit early, so he could play unopposed bis bottles were thrown, and to this day the words "Fuck Can I" are spray painted on walls, bathroom stalls, and yelled out by crowds. Something like 6 years later, and it is still talked about. 2005 NFL wildcard game Randy Moss mooning the Lambeau crowd. Packers vs Vikes. Myself and my family crossed the border to Wisconsin and gathered at my uncle's house. One side Vikings fans, the other Packers fans. After it became clear the Packers were going to lose, my Packer-loving uncle went from Winnie to straight up as whole. He told my youngest brother, who was in 5th grade, he was going to stick a sock in his mouth and beat him. He then called me a stupid purple queen and got up to spend the rest of the game drinking beer in his heated garage. My mom and dad were pissed, tried to confront him, but he dead-bolted himself inside the garage. My mom then became pissed at her sister for allowing her husband to talk to her nephews like that. My Packer-loving cousins just sat there dumbfounded. We didn't spend Christmas together that year, nor Easter. We've never watched a Packer/Viking game together again. Not a room, but our tour bus. We'd spent the entire day walking around Venice. It was incredibly hot that day, so everyone get sheet-faced to cope with the heat. We met up for the overpass bus ride back to Germany, and the contracted bus drivers tell us that the toilet will be locked for the remainder of the trip. They were unable to empty it during the 4 days of our trip. 2 hours into the drive home, 50 sunburnt super wasted 20-somethings who drank all day went absolutely crazy because they couldn't use the bathroom and the drivers wouldn't stop. The bus was absolute chaos. They started turning on each other, and I'm pretty sure this drunk girl across from me pissed her pants. Everyone became irritable and angry. Small fights and yelling matches broke out. The bus finally stopped about 4 hours into the ride, but the damage was done. Everyone was silent leaving the bus the following morning. TLDR, drunk people get angry when they can't use the bathroom on a bus. Late to the party here, but what the heck. Some friends of mine and I were invited to a New Year's party at some off-campus apartments. We get to our friend's place and his party is going along nicely. His neighbors, however, we are having one of those FACA deposit kind of parties. The landlord had already been out once to tell them to keep it down. Their party was infiltrating us and grabbing beers and whatnot. Normally no big deal, but many of them were just being pricks. My buddy and I decide to have a little fun, and we go over to their party. At around 11:50 he and I start the countdown to New Year's. 10, 9, 8, etc. Pretty soon the whole place is counting down with us there. Then the cheers of Happy New Year. All was good until someone turned on the TV to see the ball dropped on Dick Clark and there was still time on the clock. Man, I've never seen a room turn cold and angry so fast. We need our way out of there. At the first moment we could tell it was getting hostile. Nothing terrible happened, but I'm glad we didn't stick around. I have a super personal one. 10 years ago, a dear friend of mine was going through what I can only describe as a life-altering series of events. He decided to go through a career change, to go back to school, to move to a different state, and to start over in a sense. He had broken up with an abusive ex-girlfriend, and it was like his eyes had opened. No longer was he this sad, miserable, depressed person. He was jovial. He was enthusiastic. He was so eager to just live. During this phase, he met a new girl, and they seemed to hit it off. However, this girl was on the tail end of her own gross ending phase. She was dating a male in the military who was deployed, and she was unhappy, and she was ready to drop everything and go. For a few weeks, the two of them had been mulling it over when her boyfriend decided to come home early to talk with her. Mike implored her to reconsider and come with him, but she got cold feet. In a final desperate plea, the night before her boyfriend came back, He went there to try to convince her to come with him one last time before he left. She declined, and he left her house at 4:30 in the morning, defeated, but clear that he was on his own. Except that was, tragically, where this story stopped for Mike. He began to fall asleep while he was driving, and unfortunately for him, he was not the only one. The other driver on the road had too fallen asleep at the wheel and veered across traffic 3 lanes to smash right into his head first. He did not die immediately. He dialed 911, and when they arrived, they told him he was pinned in. Despite using the jaws of life, it was too little too late. He bled out in the car. You might imagine how sad this was for all of us. We were all devastated, crying, bonding in our misery at how cruel the world was. Everyone was united, supportive, but mostly just sad. Until it happened. The girl named Denise walked into the funeral ceremony, arm in arm with her military boyfriend, dressed in uniform from head to toe. Immediate, unrelenting anger overtook everyone. I punched out a mirror. Mike's father popped a scotch glass in his bare hand and began bleeding everywhere. 6 people had to be escorted out of the building. His mother began crying and screaming violently. I went and grabbed my friend David by his neck and pinned him up against the wall. You faking coward. You told them not to come, didn't you? It was the only job you had, was to make sure this didn't happen. His faking family told you not to let her come. I screamed angrily at him, choking the life out of him. She had a rig right to be here, David mumbled. My friends had to tackle me to the ground and wrestle me off of him. Even though I was being hysterical, my friend Mark was even more hostile. You goddamned, worthless piece of shit. You did this. You caused this. All of it. All because you weren't enough of a man to do the one faking thing you were asked to do. Get out of my sight, you piece of shit. Mark beckoned to David. The girl and her boyfriend were literally chased out of the funeral viewing area. Everyone was angry, screaming, and ruthless. They got in the car. As they were leaving, we heard Denise crying, I don't know why they are so mad at me. This ushered in the throwing of rocks at the car as they sped away. How classless. This act of showing up in the church where our friend lay dead, our friend who you cheated on your boyfriend with 4 months, with your boyfriend wrapped up arm in arm. How pathetic. She couldn't even bring herself to tell him why everyone was angry, instead blaming it on the family. To this day, I have never seen nor experienced hatred for a person the way rest of that funeral service, and I experienced hatred for Denise. May she forever rot in hell. Rip Mike Sawyer. In 7th grade, my teacher assigned a video project on the book The Giver, explicitly telling the class it should be serious and not funny at all. My group and I decided to do a parody. We filmed the video all day the night before it was due. The next day, when we played the legendary In Our Eyes video in class, everyone was excited. And our peers proceeded to watch us fuckheads reenacting The Giver, cross-dressing, with grapefruits as tigs, hammering a nail, because we couldn't find a syringe, into a fake baby and free-throwing it into a trash can. A Nerf war that ended with me being a soldier asking for water and get Coca-Cola as I spit up ketchup and a bunch of other shit. It lasted about 20 minutes, and even though after the first 5 minutes our teacher was shocked, she let the whole thing play. When the video ended, I had a smile on my face and I looked around. No one else was smiling, and the teacher flipped the lights on in silence. She yelled at us, then went and got the principal. When the principal brought us into the hallway, she told us what the teacher had told her, half of which was extremely exaggerated and unfair in our eyes. The teacher wanted us crucified. Not really, but this was Catholic school. The principal watched as we deleted the video from YouTube, and we got off free. Can't believe it wasn't worse, but we were good smart students. The perks of higher education, haha. It was on the release night for The Force Awakens in Melbourne. It was among the earliest releases worldwide, so it was extra special. There was a buzz in the air as we all went into a massive cinema with everyone from Star Walking, the longest running Star Wars fan club, and a heap of people who listened to Steel Wars, an Australian Star Wars podcast. The movie was fantastic and everyone still had a great buzz afterwards. Steel had a live podcast in the bar next door right after the event, so a group of 100 or so people squeeze into a bar, to listen to Melbourne comedians talk about their thoughts on the movie and just enjoy the rest of the night. Everything was going great until one of the guys from Star Walking comes up on stage and told everyone that the music was awful and so was the film. In fact, The Phantom Menace was a much superior film. It was like someone just popped a balloon. It went from a group of really excited people having a laugh together to being a group of people watching an internet critique at 3:30 in the morning. Yet another pub story playing Name That Tune. There's like 6 teams. One of the teams is full of friends of the DJ. Whatever, nobody really cares. We are here to win a trip to Vegas, baby. Yeah, until the last round. I had been keeping track of the scores because I'm anal, and I like to know we are winning. And we were, by like 400 points. The last round comes, and everybody has to name the song and the artist. 100 points for each. All the teams get their songs, so we are all basically where we were. Us 400 points ahead. Then the DJ plays the last song for his friends Christina Aguilera, Lil Kim, Maya, Pink, Lady Marmalade, and he gave them 100 points each for each artist and the song name. They beat us by 100 points because of that. I lost my sheet. I was faking furious. You just faked US, or you faking piece of sheet. How can you give all the other teams a song with one artist, then give your friends a song with faking 4? Which was followed by a round of yeah. What the fuck? Fuck you? From other randoms at the bar. Then someone threw a chair at the DJ. Then the DJ's friends attacked the table that attacked the DJ. Then everyone went faking nuts, and that's the story of my first bar fight ever. I thought that shit only happened in movies. Nope, 40 plus people going absolutely insane until the cops showed up. I thought for sure I would be in trouble for being the one to start it all, but after the cops talked to me and everyone else for what seemed like forever, they let me go, and instead the dude who threw the first chair was being put into a cop car. So my mother had a brother who had been away in a revolution back in the day. She hadn't seen him in about 15 years. So him being in the USA was kinda a big deal for our family. We set everything up. Huge barbecue, 3 freezers full of meat, and eaters, rented chairs, music, pinitas for the kids. If you haven't figured it out, we are Hispanish gets there in not even 10 minutes in. He and his friend get the mic. OFC, there's a mic, and they start to pitch us a MLM scheme. By the time he got to the financial independence part, and how with a little to no initial investment, I think my father was gonna stab him. No one signed up. He was upset that no one signed up. Quietest and quickest BBQ my family has ever had. Edit. Correction, quietest BBQ was when my older brother brought a woman as a date that was at least 20 years older than him. My parents were 25 when they had him, just to put that into perspective. I have to. The first is a beautiful summer day. My friends and I, who stayed at our college for work, were goofing off when we see a report that Michael Jackson was in the hospital. We joked that he got too excited while he was with a little boy. As more reports came about, we joked less. Then the reports of his death began on one site, then another, and then everyone was posting the story. The second was New Year's Day 2013. I had left my friend's house with a terrible hangover and went home to recover. I'm sitting on my couch watching Frozen Planet, and my parents called, but I didn't answer. Later I got a text from my dad saying to call at some point, but at the time it seemed like he just wanted to know how my evening went. An hour or two later he calls me and I answer. He has bad news. My uncle had a stroke and the doctors were saying that he was not going to make it to that evening. I had just seen my uncle less than a week earlier on Christmas Day. One time my English teacher ran out of the classroom and disappeared for a couple days. We didn't know what had happened, but we were only 15 and didn't really care. Then one day we come into the English room and our teacher has come back. Everyone is like, oh hey, where'd you go? And he plugged his laptop into the projector and showed us a picture of his newborn son. The majority of the class was like, oh good for you. He was a well-liked teacher, so everyone was happy for him, except one kid. That one kid was sat next to me and said, sir, I want to kill your baby out of the blue. I feared for my life being sat next to the kid that says things like that. Immediately everyone's freaking out. Teacher pulls a desk forward and forces the other kid to walk. Through the door we could hear the teacher giving him hell. teacher came back in the room and the other kid was sent to solitary. Nobody spoke for about half the lesson after that. 2015 MLS Championship. I was sitting in the Columbus Crew supporters section. One of the players for the opposing team is dribbling towards our goal down the sideline, takes a poor touch, and it goes about a solid foot out of bounds. Our section gets excited for the turnover, except the ref doesn't call the plainly obvious out of bounds. The player keeps going, and within a few seconds, they score a goal. The section exploded in screams at the ref, then got silent after the goal, then started screaming again, more angrily. I'm not sure if it was right after that or later in the game, but many beer cans were thrown on the field, not by me, and that's very unusual in American soccer games to see stuff thrown onto the field. It was an awful call that came after we had already given up a terrible goal in the first minutes of the game. GK tried to clear it. It deflected off a forward right back into the net. I can't seem to find a video of it. That hasn't been taken down, but it's quite plainly very far out of bounds. Even someone not familiar with soccer would notice it. At my local community college they hosted a program that allowed people who hadn't gotten all their high school credits to attend the college and work towards an associate's degree and get their high school credits at the same time. I think it was a 2-year-long program that with clever manipulation of courses could get you a nearly free associates in sciences and your high school diploma point. I'd attended for a year more or less. Come the end of spring I set up my next courses and I even talked my friend into joining. During fall there is this orientation that welcomes new and old students to the program / explains stuff. It's mandatory, so I walk into the building with a ton of other students. I'm excited and ready for the new year. My friend is even there. We might end up in some classes together. Hey, I might actually learn things and graduate. Point. The advisor / presenter walks in and proceeds to announce to the class that the funding was being cut / transferred for the program, and it was likely that they wouldn't take any new students, and many that weren't close enough to graduating would be dropped entirely from the program. End presentation. Everyone files out, and I see this long line of people standing in line and waiting to talk to the advisor, trying to see what it means for them. You can hear her saying, "I'm sorry, I don't know what will happen yet," to many of the students as, shoulders drooping, they file out the door. So that was the end of summer. Bummer. I live in New Zealand, and a family from Maine had just moved over about 6 months before the 2012 Super Bowl with the Patriots in it. They decided to throw an authentic SB party, and it was a faking great time. They gave us little team badges and served food and everything. Nothing like the rugby matches here. They weren't even big football fans as well. Of course, every person who knew their hosts well chose Pats badges, whereas I went for the Giants badge because they were the only team I'd heard of. There were a total of 3 Giants fans in the room: myself, a boy in a wheelchair with muscular dystrophy, and one of the host's daughters, now ex. Nobody cared, however, as it was all fun and games. That was until Bradshaw sat down in the end zone. Everyone was pissed. The disabled boy and I went quiet and moved towards the back of the living room, and the only sound made was by the dickhead, now ex, which was quickly silenced as well. Nobody ate any of the rest of the food. Point. Moral of the story is, if America is in your town, just go along with the rest of the crowd so nobody turns on you so harshly. At the Bathurst 12-hour race this year, second place, which ended up being last year's winner, the Nissan GT-R 35, was to be given their trophy by the mayor of Bathurst. As soon as the mayor walked out, everyone booed. At least 95% of the people at the awards ceremony were not from Bathurst. I don't think much of our mayor, because council elects the mayor, not the people, but I wasn't aware he was hated that much. Point. The other time was last year. I got on a train to go to my so's house. We left the station I got on at 200 meters down the track. The train stopped. The brakes on the back carriage had locked up. The announcer was trying so hard to keep us updated. When it was eventually announced, an hour later, that we had to wait for a new back carriage to turn up and wait for a carriage to pull the broken one off, the train almost broke into a riot. We ended up being there for 3 hours. 200 meters away from a platform we could have all gotten off at and gotten to Sydney different ways. We were on an XPT instead of just a normal Sydney train. I got to my partner's at 2 AM instead of 11 PM that night. Boyfriend's 21st birthday party. His friend who hosted it started calling him out for being a worthless piece of shit coward and blah blah blah, just because he hit his limit and was being responsible by not drinking any further. He even pulled out the big cards and rubbed in the fact that he's a coward because he and I have been together for 7 years now and he hasn't proposed. Again, we are trying to be responsible because we started dating when we were like 14 over 15 and people change a lot when they go from being teens to adults. We don't want to make a huge mistake by getting married and then just end up divorced a few years down the line. Shit went downhill really fast and they got into a bit of an argument which caused my boyfriend's friend to punch a hole in the wall, shove and hit his wife, and then go off for a 3 AM drunken walk, yelling and shit. Party went from lit to everyone silently looking at each other, wondering if they should leave it alone or call the cops on him shoving and hitting his wife. In the end we decided against it and simply made sure to hide the guy's keys and such so he couldn't do anything too stupid. When he came home he apologized and went to bed and then woke up, not remembering a second of it. So it's my cousin's 50th birthday party and he wants it at his local pub, bar. He provided an open bar, including top shelf, a fine assortment of finger food. There must have been 60 family members attending. First few hours go well, catching up with those rellas you barely see, great music, dancing, a few more drinks, few more, then I need the loo, bathroom. As I'm about to open the door, I remember looking across at my family. They looked so happy. It brought warmth to my heart. So I go to the loo, pee, and wash my hands. A younger cousin comes in, and we start chatting away, like girls do lol. I'm not sure how long we were there, maybe 10 minutes. I mean, it was the loo. Her little sister comes in telling us there's a fight. I'm like, what, who? Everyone was so happy a minute ago. What happened? Well, I didn't witness it, but my mum was accused of slapping her older sister in the face. My mum tells it the other way around. They grabbed each other in fisticuffs and rough and tumble and it totally wrecked the evening in front of their kids and grandkids. I'm talking about 60 to 70-year-old women here. No one told me what really happened, but the entire family has disowned us as a result. Some families are faked up. Mine sure is. Does virtual room counts? As soon the first Radeon RX 480 reviews came out and pointed out it draws too much power and can damage motherboards, AMD fans started to rage, accusing reviewers of being video shills. People asking for help because the 480 had any problem, even unrelated to the power one, was trolls, and that any criticism of AMD must have been done by an Nvidia employee. I was chilling around in the r/AMD Discord chat, and when the flame war erupted, I tried to educate people on how power work. Flamure instead worsened. Moderators accused me of being an Nvidia employee and banned me. Some people even started to track down all my posts on AMD forums and here on Reddit and mass downvote or flag. Same thing happened to anyone else that made even a minor tiny noise negative about AMD. And I think many people got just perplexed. Product launches can go rocky, but AMD really faked up. It is the fuck up of fuck ups in the hardware business. Teacher here. My first year, the superintendent came by a staff meeting to let everybody know that, beginning in the next year, the teaching/admins were getting raises. Also, they had to cut some janitorial/lunchroom/maintenance staff due to spending issues, and the ones who still had a job would not receive raises. The people that would be losing jobs were sitting in the room, devastated, and the teachers were absolutely furious that they were being given raises at the expense of others. It was one of the most heartbreaking/alarming moments I have ever experienced. Teachers were standing up and saying that they would refuse a pay raise if it meant somebody would keep their job, and in the middle of it all the superintendent loses his shit and starts screaming at the teachers. Things like, "If you aren't going to help me run this district, then get out of my way." It's worth noting that I taught in an incredibly small poor community. To lose a job was a huge deal to these people. Annual company meeting. held on a Friday afternoon with about 1800 people in the audience. Point where it was announced that the company was profitable. Yee. Profit sharing would be paid out in the next paycheck. Yee. Profit sharing would be 0.0825% of annual pay. Wait, what? Typo? Oh, a joke. Ha 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 ha. Wait, he's not joking. But that's like $5. Seriously. Like $5 for. The company wasn't as profitable as hoped. Oh. 5. Raises, promotions, and bonuses were cancelled. What? 6. Company-wide 10% layoffs to be announced Monday. Oh, seat 7. The $25 million campus expansion would continue on schedule. What the fuck? 8. Executive team would be heading to Lake Tahoe for a 1-week executive planning session the next week. Fuck. You point over about 30 seconds we went from literally standing and screaming yee to bewilderment to sheer anger. People were screaming at the stage point. When our secretary annual filings came out later that afternoon we learned the executives took raises. Had they mentioned that it might have gone from ugly to violent? Point. That was a long weekend. Point. I wasn't laid off. It probably wasn't Lake Tahoe, but it was something like that. It's been 15 years. It was normal for them to do things like this, but to do it while the middle management has to let 10% go was cowardly. Face your people. I would have to say Thanksgiving last year. My aunt comes to visit every year, and after dinner we sit and talk for a while before she leaves. It's always the same. We catch up, and then we have friendly debates on various topics. Well, this past year my aunt decided to drop a bombshell on our conversation. We were talking about politics or some other fairly boring subject when she suddenly starts openly bashing gay people and praising Kim Davis for refusing to issue the marriage license. She started going off on a tangent about how they need to use their genitals for penetrating the right gender for which they intended. You could have heard a pin drop. My parents are old-fashioned, but they don't openly bash gay people. They don't agree with it, but it has nothing to do with them, so they don't really care either way, which is the way it should be. My aunt on the other hand made me feel like she would join the Westboro Baptist Church at a funeral protest, and the tension in the room got so thick you couldn't cut it with a knife, even if you wanted to. My dad tried to play it off with a joke, but you could tell everyone was completely appalled. At that point we decided we were full, and it was time to go. Worst Thanksgiving ever. We were at work, closing down the restaurant, generally enjoying ourselves as we chatted, and grew close to the end of the day. At one point, one coworker started cleaning the not-in-use part of the grill with a chemical spray. Admittedly, I wouldn't want that near my food, but it was honestly harmless, and wasn't really close enough to cause any issues that didn't matter to a few ladies waiting for their food. One woman demanded to get a refund, which she did. Of course, this bitch didn't believe us when we said her money was returned to her debit card account, and started demanding that we offer proof that we weren't stealing her money, because she works in retail and their receipts all show negative transactions, so therefore ours must too. All the while, she's ranting about how much our restaurant and its employees suck, punctuated by these weird winks. That must have been her attempt at not appearing totally infuriated. At one point, she demanded to see her original receipt for some reason. I had had enough at this point, so I snapped that we no longer had it. She asked where it was. I quipped back, it was gone, in the garbage point. So this bitch forces my supervisor and best friend to dig through the trash to find this receipt. He can't find it, gives her the number of our general manager, and promises a follow-up if she finds her money wasn't returned to her. The restaurant's mood was pretty tense, and arrested after that. Once we locked the doors we all began ranting about how we had been visited by literal Satan. This one happened in a chat room online. About a couple years back, someone around Tumblr started an alternate reality game involving AIs and personality blogs. There were two main characters, but they had very distinct personalities, and according to the ARG creator, they were genderless characters. Understood. I frequented a chat room that liked to discuss theory and puzzles about the game, and I happened to pop up and get everyone's attention by being pretty active in the game, calling the in-game phone numbers, etc. Everyone was really enamored with the whole thing, and I was enjoying it too. Now, since there were two main characters that are vastly different, I pictured one of them as a female and one as male due to their dialogue and some of the images they posted. Using just a he-she system helped me differentiate, instead of having to say they to describe them one at a time. The entire chat proceeded to hate me and attempted to police me from then on. And even though I acknowledged that I completely understood that the AI were genderless, they still didn't like me using actual pronouns as just a meaningless way to quickly differentiate two fictional characters. They went so far as to call me transphobic because of my apparent heresy. Gotta loves Tumblr. New Year's Eve about 3 to 4 years back, I was in old Sacramento to watch the fireworks. We were waiting at a bar and everyone is having a good time drinking, when a guy walking by bumps into this girl and spills her drink all over her. The guy apologized and offered to butt her a new drink. The guy took full blame. The girl, drunk off her, started yelling at the guy telling him to fuck off, and she storms off. She goes over and tells her boyfriend what happened, and her boyfriend went over and started getting in the guy's face. The guy tells the boyfriend the same thing. He was sorry and it was his fault and he would buy another drink. The boyfriend pulls out a gun and shoots the guy point blank. People take off out of the bar. The security guard sees the boyfriend, tells him to stop, and the guy shoots the security guard too. Then the guy fled. I don't remember exactly what happened, but I believe the guy was caught a day or so later, and I believe the one guy died, and the security guard lived. But that event ended the festivities in all of Old Town Sacramento. They kicked everyone out of the area, didn't set off the fireworks for the midnight fireworks show, and the cops set up blockades around all the exits in Old Town Sacramento. A shooting scare turned a rather reflective moment to one of shock and terror. When I was in college, I was in a choir that toured and performed around the world. Just before our first concert, we were sitting in a conference room, reflecting on one of our pieces, as a way of investing ourselves in the music we were performing. Everyone was relaxed, solemn, and introspective. Cue a man in the foyer of the church having a mental breakdown, screaming and knocking things over. Given that this is a few months after the Sandy Hook shooting, which was a few months after the shooting in Aurora, Colorado, several individuals heard the banging and screaming as gunfire, and the rest of the choir followed the herd. Next thing you know, we are piled in the corner of the room, shaking and looking toward the door in fear. Some of us are crying, some of us are bleeding, dresses are torn, music is scattered everywhere. Our director, who had gone out to investigate, confirmed there was no danger. When we spread back out to collect ourselves, the room had taken on a much more shocked atmosphere. 5 minutes later, we lined up, entered the sanctuary, and began our concert. Grade 8 band trip to Kansas City, the absolute pinnacle of our middle school experience. 70 to 80 post-pubescent private school kids away from their parents raising hell. The grand finale of the whole thing was a trip to Kauffman Stadium to see the Royals, who at the time were still the laughingstock of the league, play the Tigers. Like I said, the Royals were absolute shit at the time, so in order to get butts in the seats they had a promotion where if the team scored more than 10 runs, every stub holder was entitled to an entire box of Krispy Kreme donuts. I should preface this by saying that we were traveling from Canada, where the Krispy Kreme legend had reached peak frenzy. This was the capital of the early 2000s. It was a big deal. So the Royals turned in this freak performance where they scored more than 5 runs for the first time in over a month, and by the 7th inning they were already at 10. The energy in the stadium was palpable. We are losing our collective minds at the thought of going home with our own personal 12-pack. 8th inning goes by, nothing. Then in the 9th inning, a breakthrough. The Royals put up 3 more runs, and we're all going berserk. We pile back into the bus, and as we pull up to the hotel for the night, one of our supervisors gets on the PA and says that she has an announcement to make. Our room keys would be waiting for us inside, but to retrieve them, we would have to forfeit the ticket stub, so that the 70 dozen donuts could be brought back to the school and shared with everyone. I still remember the roar like it was yesterday. Hysterical tears, headrests being torn off the seats and whipped toward the front of the bus. Kids on the phone with their parents trying to get the teachers fired and or have them sued. Some refused to get off the bus well past midnight point. It went from absolute elation to chaos in the purest sense, and in the end we still ended up eating 3 to 4 donuts each. I miss middle school problems. I worked for a company that had a great profit sharing plan. Great as in once I received a bonus of over 50% of my salary. We always had a meeting on the last Friday in January to announce the payout pool. Obviously a very exciting day that everyone looks forward to. We received bonuses every year for 12 years. This one year we had our absolute best year in profit since I started, double last year's profit. We walked into the meeting, a meeting for about 200 people, and there were no chairs set up. The president announced that the meeting wouldn't take long. We didn't meet the minimum threshold for when the profit sharing would pay out. What changed from last year to this year, you ask? Turns out the president instituted a new plan all on his own and got the parent company to agree to it. We made over $14 mil profit on about $350 million sales. Missed the minimum by less than $50k. Bad day. Not exactly a room, more like an entire town. I go to the University of Michigan, which is a massive football school. My friends and I aren't really that into it, but for our second biggest game of the season, against our in-state rival Michigan State, we all decided to get together and watch the game at one of their houses, the main social center of our group. It's located quite a few blocks from the stadium. It was a home game, but close enough so that you can hear the band playing during halftime. The game goes on, and we are doing well. It's the last couple seconds, and it looks like we'll actually win this one. We hadn't beaten them in quite a few years. Then, this happens. Not being big sports fans ourselves, we were all mildly pissed, but got over it pretty quickly. We stepped outside though, and the sound coming from the stadium, if pure, unbridled rage has a sound, that was it. Like an angry war cry. My friend drove us all back to our individual apartments in the event that fans decided to riot, as sometimes happens. Friend of mine threw a big birthday party for himself at a semi-expensive restaurant. He arranges all the food, tables, etc. in advance. About 15 guests there, including me. We are going to more or less split the bill evenly. Point, we are all friends. We are all laughing and joking, having a good time. We all have normal amounts of food/drink, so we don't understand why the bill arrives and is almost $600. Apparently this restaurant tacked on a huge service charge for the high guest total. Point 20 had been invited that the birthday boy/host just assumed we'd have no problem with. In short, several guests had a problem, and rightfully so. When the restaurant refused to budge on the charge, at least one guest simply walked out without paying at all, and several others chewed the host out. One ended her friendship with him for good. The rest of us threw in what we could. $40 from me, about twice what I'd prepared for, and dashed. I heard one girl felt bad and charged a huge amount to her card, but didn't really know. Point, the birthday boy/host was/is known for being irresponsible and immature, and I've since learned things about him that pretty much erased any sympathy I had for his ruined birthday. So I used to work at a Best Buy. A couple of years ago, we were told by managers that if the store did well then everyone would get a bonus. Size depended on how well we did. Well, we blew that quarter out of the water, and our GM was like, let's have applause for everyone that we did so well. You will see your bonus on your next paycheck. Well, 2 weeks later, only about half the employees got the bonus, which was around 10% of our yearly wage. Managers said there was an issue and we would all get the bonus and just to wait while it was figured out. Well, one morning the GM says in front of all the employees that actually it was only for the sales floor, even though we are supposed to be on the same team. I was told by some of the people in other stores that they were told that they would get the bonus too, and then were told that they would not be getting it. Let's just say many people, including me, decided to quit after the GM said to our faces that he never said that. Just last week actually, I was at my aunt's 50th birthday party, where everyone was having a great time getting drunk after hours. However, there was my aunt's boyfriend's son there. He got incredibly drunk incredibly quickly. Point, he was drunk even before the sun went down, and was making snide comments thinly veiled as verbal foreplay to all of my cousin's friends. My cousin was partying with them later on when they brought out what they had bought for the night. A double-ended beer bong funnel. As soon as my cousin started drinking it with them, he went this weird kind of overprotection against the guy she was doing it with. He eventually started arguing with him about how he was too old to be doing such things and acting childish, which was ironic, because he was much older and still living with his father. Eventually, when he kept berating my cousin's friend, her boyfriend stepped in and started defending him. This man-child then says the douchey phrase, "Let's go talk over here," which was pretty stupid because he basically just walked from the outskirts of a small group to just outside a larger group of people. At this point I knew what was going to happen, so I went to the garage for some food. Sure enough, not 30 seconds after I'm eating a fried chicken leg, I hear people fighting and my family start yelling. My cousin then proceeded to beat the shit out of him, and his father eventually dragged him to his car and drove him home. No one has heard from him since. So yeah, that was long as fuck. TLDR, my scumbag Steve of an aunt's boyfriend's son got drunk and picked a fight with my cousin and her boyfriend at my aunt's 50th b-day party. I worked for a security firm back in 2003 just doing basic data entry. I was the lowest guy on the totem pole. I'd been there for 4 months when one day, a bunch of guys in suits came in to have a meeting with our entire office. It was late November, and these people were all being super friendly to everyone, so we were just expecting a meeting about the holiday season and what to expect for 2004. Turns out they were there to lay off about 90% of the staff. They laid off all middle management, including my boss who'd been there for over 20 years. They laid off basically anyone who was making more than $30,000. Anyone who wasn't being laid off was being transferred to the corporate office, which was about 30 miles away. The kicker was they decided to keep on about 10 of us, me included. The 10 of us were just low-level data entry, customer service and reception. They announced this in front of the entire office, basically putting the spotlight on the 10 or so of us who didn't deserve to have a job at that point. Imagine busting your ass for a company for 20 years, only to be laid off right before Christmas, and the company deciding to keep on a bunch of young idiots who had less than a year of time with the company. People lost their shit. It was actually kind of scary. I thought someone was going to fucking murder me. I went to see a friend's band play at a record store in Austin, Texas last year, and about halfway through the show, the time slots at this particular venue allowed for 3 bands to play a set of about 45 minutes each, so this would have been in the middle of the second band's set. A guy took his shirt off in the pit to reveal 2 very prominent neo-Nazi tattoos of a huge swastika above his heart and a Hitler healing on his torso. This being a punk show where most of the crowd had relatively leftist views, people started shouting at him to fuck off with the American History X sheet. Eventually, the Nazi singled out one black guy in particular to start shit with, and they took the fight outside. Long story short, the black guy clocks the Nazi. Nazi goes back inside and gets his friend to start up round 2. Nazi pulls a knife out and stabs 6 people. Rest of the crowd starts stomping the Nazis a new mud hole until they run off and are arrested shortly afterward. Apparently the main instigator only got 8 years probation and time served for his role in the evening's sheet fit. When I was 11, my sister was marrying her military fiancé at a venue down the street from my home. The family was invited, like everyone within the family tree. When they were reciting their vows and getting ready for their last parts, the priest asked if anyone objected. Suddenly, my now uncle-in-law stood up, cleared his throat and spoke up about how she was a sin, ruining his family, and should never marry his son, a devil, yada yada, typical bullshit. My family went from tearful rejoice to vengeful murder. The groom and my family fought him and his girlfriend. My sister ran off crying into the back room and my brother-in-law followed after her. My father started to fight the man himself and verbally pushed him out with the man's girlfriend. I think this all started because he didn't believe in marriage. The police came up and escorted him out as he was still saying shit to my family's face. My sister and my brother-in-law finished their vows and cut their cake an hour later, after she fixed her Mac-up and calmed her nerves. We ever heard from him again, but it still pisses everyone off. I was a tar for a freshman bio lab a few years ago. Not really the happiest bunch of students in the lab, but I wouldn't say there was anything bad that day point, except the return of a paper the students had submitted a week prior. Our coordinator pushed real hard for us to be tough on plagiarism and proper citations. Basically, every one of my 40 or so students didn't get it right. So I decided to tell the class that everyone got a 0 because they all failed to properly cite sources, despite the fact we had spent an entire lab on that very subject. But I wasn't going to actually give them all zeros. I just wanted them to sweat it for a minute or two, so they'd remember to do it properly the next time around. Holy shit. 2 or 3 students just immediately got up and started to walk out. 1 or 2 of my sheet students started yelling at me. The entire class was moaning and groaning, telling me I couldn't do this. What I thought would be 2 or 3 minutes of making them sweat it only lasted about 20 seconds before I told them all I was just trying to teach them a lesson so they didn't meet some teacher in the future with no sympathy. It got to the point that I think I could have gotten shanked after class. Needless to say, my second lab got a stern talking to about their failures with citations, and it went over much better. TLDR. Told a lab full of freshmen they all got zeros on a big assignment for failure to cite sources. Feared for my life, even though I wasn't actually going to fail anyone. At a club meeting, we had a miscommunication between 2 members on something the week before. The head advisor, who wasn't even involved, thought it was a good idea to take it out on everyone throughout the meeting and egged people on until one of the members' family spoke up. Suddenly, the head advisor started screaming at everyone, and the 2 members' families started arguing. The head advisor threw books at an unrelated member for being on her phone during all this, flung herself over the desk, and went after the oldest person there who was related to the member involved sitting silently, and started screaming at her. We thought for sure someone would get punched. After a few minutes, the head advisor and her 30-something daughter leave, cursing and screaming, vowing never to return. She comes by 20 minutes later to inspect the damage like a vulture. The members had already fixed it and apologized, and it was pretty much done, but she hadn't gotten the satisfaction of watching it all fall apart, so she had to come back. What an awful incident, and an awful person. TLDR. At a club meeting, a miscommunication sets the stage for a small argument between 2 members. Head advisor loses it, throws a book at an unrelated member, flings over a desk to scream at someone who hadn't said anything, leaves screaming and returns after a while to watch it burn.